Are you responsible for his death?
Yes, I am.
Netflix's movie The Good Nurse tells the real-life story of Charles Cullen, a New Jersey native who became known as the Angel of Death after he admitted to taking the lives of anywhere between 30 and 40 people at the various hospitals and nursing homes he was a nurse at from 1988 to 2003. I'm Adam Andrews, and today on Where Are They Now, we are going to talk all about Charlie Cullen, the Angel of Death. Charlie was born in New Jersey on February 22nd, 1960, and was the youngest of 8 siblings. His father, Edmund, was a bus driver who passed away before Cullen turned a year old, and his mother, a homemaker, passed on in a car accident when he was in his senior year of high school. Through a lot of his life before becoming a nurse, he often had a hard time fitting in and was bullied for this. This was even the case when, after dropping out of high school, Cullen joined the US Navy and served aboard the submarine USS Woodrow Wilson, as well as the supply ship USS Canopus. Cullen passed the intense psychological examinations required to work on the submarines, which apparently didn't make note of his psychological issues that resulted in him attempting to take his own life multiple times from a young age, all the way into adulthood. One of these attempts occurred during his time in the Navy and had him committed several times over his time there. Cullen was eventually medically discharged from the Navy in 1984, but the exact reasons have not been disclosed. It was after his discharge that he began to pursue nursing, attending Mountainside Hospital's nursing school in New Jersey, graduating as president of his nursing class in 1986. After this, he began working at St. Barnabas Medical Center in Livingston, Essex County, New Jersey. It was here that he met Adrienne Baum and married her in 1987, and this is also where the first of his admitted crimes took place the following year on June 11, 1988, when he administered a lethal dose of intravenous medication to a patient. There were a few other patients from St. Barnabas that became victims of Cullen's over the years he worked at the medical center, up until he left in January 1992, when the hospital authorities began investigating the contaminated IV bags that Cullen was most likely responsible for. A month after leaving St. Barnabas, Cullen got a position at Warren Hospital in Phillipsburg. At this hospital, we know that Cullen took the lives of at least 3 older women, and he had another close brush with being caught, as the last of the 3 women, before her passing, had claimed that a thin, sneaky male nurse, who was not her nurse, had come into her room and injected her while she was supposed to be sleeping, but unfortunately, her claims were ruled as unfounded. The next year, in 1993, things in Cullen's personal life took another downward spiral with a nasty divorce from his wife, Adrienne Baum. By this point, Charlie and Adrienne shared 2 daughters, but Adrienne had become more and more uncomfortable with the behavior Cullen had been displaying. Among other things, his wife claimed that Cullen had spiked people's drinks with lighter fluid, burned their daughters' books, and even left their daughters with a babysitter for a whole week. This, plus his apparent mistreatment of the family dogs, led to Adrienne filing a restraining order against Cullen the same year, 1993. Following this, Charlie moved into a basement apartment in Phillipsburg, and he's even claimed to have wanted to quit nursing at this point in his life. But child support payments he had to make meant that he was forced to continue to work. It really kind of makes you wonder that if he had quit nursing, if more lives would have been spared, or if he would have continued his spree in some other way. An event in March 1993 leads me to believe he would have committed more. Cullen broke into the home of a female co-worker in the middle of the night while she and her son slept. While that is incredibly creepy, he thankfully left without waking either of them. He did actually begin stalking this woman, who eventually filed a police report, and Cullen then pleaded guilty to trespassing and got a year of probation. Following this, Cullen took 2 months off from work and was treated for depression in 2 psychiatric facilities after another attempt to take his own life. Despite his treatment, he attempted this again 2 more times before the end of the year. Cullen also had another brush with being caught in September of 1993 as well, when a 91-year-old patient at Warren Hospital had reported Cullen entering into her room and injecting her. A day later, she passed away, and her family, particularly her son, had claimed that her passing was absolutely not natural. In response to this, the hospital gave Cullen a lie detector test, which he actually passed. I'm not sure how he managed to do that, but he did. Cullen would then move to the intensive care unit of Hunterdon Medical Center in Flemington in the spring, staying here for about 3 years. He claimed to put his spree on pause during the first 2 years at Hunterdon, but there is no way to verify this claim since the hospital records for that period of time had been destroyed when he was eventually arrested, which I will circle back to later. What Cullen did admit to was a string of 5 patients between January and September of 1996 who he had taken the lives of with increased doses of digoxin, which was one of his preferred modus operandi. Digoxin is a medication routinely used to treat people with an irregular heartbeat or heart failure, but it can be lethal in large doses. Outside of digoxin, Cullen would also inject patients saline pouches with lethal doses of insulin and epinephrine that wouldn't necessarily cause red flags. After his time at Hunterdon, Cullen moved on to another facility, Morristown Memorial Hospital, but it turns out he couldn't quite cut it here as he was fired for poor performance shortly after, which led to a stint of about 6 months of unemployment, which subsequently meant he stopped paying child support. He was again treated for depression and admitted to another psychiatric facility. In 1998, Cullen landed a job at the Liberty Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Here, he ran into a bunch of problems. For starters, Cullen found himself being accused of giving patients medications at unscheduled times, as well as entering into a patient's room with syringes in his hand. This encounter somehow left the patient with a broken arm, so I'm suspecting that the accusations and this incident were both examples of attempts on patients' lives. For the broken arm incident, Cullen was fired, but not before he caused the passing of another patient, which was actually blamed on another nurse. From Liberty, he somehow kept getting work, being hired at Easton Hospital in November 1998, taking another patient's life the next month in December 30th, injecting them with a lethal amount of digoxin. This time it did lead to an internal investigation within the hospital, but the evidence found did not implicate Cullen in a definitive enough manner. Now, if you were surprised that he has found this much work before, well, he continued to do so even after the internal investigation. Now, during this time, most hospitals were desperate for nurses as there was a national shortage in nurses, and unfortunately, before Cullen, there was also no system in place to identify nurses with histories of mental health and/or employment issues. There was also the fact that hospitals did not take proper responsibility for all the problems Cullen had been causing, as they feared lawsuits from patients' families, which, I don't know about you guys, but that kind of infuriates me, just a smidge. If a lawsuit was what they were worried about, it really came back to bite them in the butt when Cullen was eventually arrested. Unfortunately, we are only in 1999 so far in Cullen's story, and we have a few more years until he was actually arrested. Cullen got another hospital job in the burn unit of Lehigh Valley Hospital Cedar Crest in Allentown, where he took the life of yet another patient with an attempt on one more. He resigned a month later and then got another job at the cardiac care unit of St. Luke's Hospital in Bethlehem, where he stayed for about 3 years, which resulted in the passing of at least 5 more patients and attempts on 2 others that we know of. Most of his crimes here went undetected until another coworker discovered vials in the disposal for medications that had no recreational value outside of the hospital. That factor made the theft of these vials even more irregular. Cullen was caught for the theft in the subsequent investigation, which resulted in the hospital offering him a deal to either resign with a neutral recommendation or to be fired completely. Obviously, he chose the resignation and left in 2002. Another crazy fact about this time in his life is that 7 people who worked with Cullen at St. Luke's had gone to the Lehigh County District Attorney with suspicions that Cullen had been using medications to cause the passing of patients. But investigators never actually looked into Cullen's employment or psychological past, and after 9 months, the case was dropped with a lack of evidence. Thanks to this, Cullen was able to get another job in the critical care unit of the Somerset Medical Center in Somerville in September of 2002. He even began to date another woman around this time too. Despite that, Cullen's depression got even worse, which resulted in the passing of at least 13 more patients by the middle of 2003. But it still didn't stop right away. In June of 2003, he attempted to take the life of one Philip Gregor, but was unsuccessful even though Philip would pass away 6 months later. After the hospital began to notice Cullen getting into the rooms and computer records of patients he wasn't assigned, and the computerized dispensing cabinets showed him do a number of things, including requesting medications that patients were not prescribed and a large number of requests that were cancelled or were in quick succession of one another. The executive director of the New Jersey Poison Information and Education System, in July 2003, informed the hospital's officials of at least 4 suspicious medication-related fatalities within the hospital, which indicated that an employee was likely responsible. But despite that, the hospital didn't contact the justice system until October of 2003, by which time Cullen had been able to take the lives of at least another 5 more patients and another failed attempt on 1 more. It was when a patient passed away from low blood sugar that month that the hospital finally went to the New Jersey State Police, who launched an investigation into Cullen's past employment with other hospitals and the numerous suspicious activity and the sheer number of patients who had passed away at the several hospitals he had worked at over the years. On October 31st of 2003, the hospital had fired Cullen, claiming that it was for lying on his job application. Now, if you have seen The Good Nurse on Netflix, then you are aware of the key role that fellow nurse Amy Lauren played in the ensuing investigation. While working together at Somerset, Amy and Charlie would actually become friends. She has said that she thought he was a kind man who had even helped the single mother, who was also suffering from cardiomyopathy and had been working night shifts at the hospital to qualify for health insurance. After she had been provided with documents that showed Cullen's medication requests, she knew that he was the one who had been taking patients' lives. She told CBS later that there were so many withdrawals of lethal medications that you wouldn't order unless you wanted to do what Cullen did. Now, working with the investigators, Amy began to collect evidence at the hospital, and she even tried to convince him to confess and wore a wire after investigators asked her to when she visited Cullen after work one day. Now, after several weeks of surveillance and the help that Amy Lauren provided, police had enough probable cause to arrest Cullen. They did so on December 12, 2003, while Cullen was at a restaurant. 2 days later, Charlie Cullen admitted to detectives Dan Baldwin and Tim Braun that he had taken the lives of Florian Gall and a total of 40 patients over the past 16 years, not to mention the attempted ones. While he admitted to this many, investigations into Cullen's activity have turned up that his number of crimes could potentially go as high as 400 patients. For the film, released in early October, Netflix adapted Charles Graeber's nonfiction book The Good Nurse, A True Story of Medicine, Madness, and Murder. Charlie is played by Eddie Redmayne, with Amy Lauren being played by Jessica Chastain. I'm Adam Andrews with Where Are They Now? Stay safe and well informed out there, kids.